do you think about spending summers in the Arctic and summers in the Antarctic? Because you know how summers in the Arctic are winters in the Antarctic and vice versa. So it's not a paradox. That's really possible. But does it sound like paradise to you? Well, it does to the Sterna paradisea, the Arctic tern, a very special bird that we're going to talk about today on Life's Potluck Buffet. And we're going to ask the cards for how to help us as we navigate our migratory routes through life. I'm John Paulus, and you're listening to Life's Potluck Buffet only on YouTube. If you've been enjoying Life's Potluck Buffet, please subscribe. If you've already subscribed, thank you so much. And if you have a Brave browser, you can now contribute basic attention tokens to Life's Potluck Buffet with John Paulus on YouTube. Thank you for your support, and thank you for listening. If you ever get the chance to have those three wishes, from a genie in a bottle, a good one would be for, if you like to travel, for free. A good one would be, I would like as many frequent flyer miles as an Arctic tern flies in its lifetime, on average. So let's just get this get that number off the bat. It's around 1.5 million miles, and Arctic terns live maybe about 30 years. Why do they fly so many miles? Well, it's a function of the fact that they breed in the Arctic in places like Greenland. And in fact, the scientists in Greenland have done some amazing work tracking through geolocator tags the migratory patterns of Arctic terns to come up with amazing insights into the world of the Arctic tern. And so they breed in the Arctic, in Greenland, for example, and then they make a very long trip to spend the Arctic winter, in the summer of Antarctica. So they fly down for the Antarctic summer. And so that's really, they spend most of their lives in these Arctic summer conditions, whether in the Arctic or in Antarctica. And that is the life of a Arctic tern. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty cool how they figured out all of this. Well, what scientists did in Greenland is they had to put little geolocators on thousands of migratory Arctic terns, which is, they're all migratory. They spend a lot of time in the air. And what they did was, in their summer breeding grounds in Greenland, they simply put kind of simple traps, the kinds you might expect from Wile E. Coyote, where it's like a box with a stick on it, above something that's a lure for the, roadrunner or something, and then you pull the stick and they're trapped. Well, that's what these scientists did, but in a way that was a lot smarter than what Wile E. Coyote does, because instead of trying to lure the Arctic terns with food or whatever, they simply put the traps above their nests that had eggs in them. And so when the tern would leave the nest, surely the tern's not going to just leave that nest there. The tern will come back in order to incubate the eggs. So they just waited for the terns to come back, and then they trapped them, then they tagged them, and then everything was cool. And so once they had tagged all of these terns, they now had, thousands of pieces of data to follow. And what they found was fascinating. Around August, the terns leave the Arctic and they fly into the North Atlantic. And there's an area in the North Atlantic, in the kind of western part of North Atlantic towards Canada, where they spend a whole month just eating the fish. This is a place where in this time there's lots of small fish for the Arctic terns to eat. And so they spent a whole month just fueling up there in the North Atlantic because they got a long flight ahead of them. So what they do after that was also mind-blowing for the scientists because they start to go down south, but they end up splitting into two groups. And one group follows the coast of South America down to the Weddell Sea in the Antarctic. And the other group will follow the coast of Africa. And though they eventually end up in the Weddell Sea, because that's where all Arctic terns spend their Antarctic summer. So, in other words, the northern hemisphere's winter, but that's the summer in the Antarctic. So the other group, the group that followed the African coastline of the Atlantic, that group looks like some of them kind of winged out to the the Southern Sea and like the Indian Ocean a little bit, and then came back to the Weddell Sea. So they kind of made a little bit, probably looking for some food, as they always are. A lot of calories expended, and this is a 22,000-mile flight, so you need a lot of fish to keep going. And so that group makes its way to the Weddell Sea as well. And they all spend the Antarctic summer there, hanging out on the ice and fishing and eating as many fish as possible because they have a long flight back. Their flight back, they do very, very quickly, which was different from the flight down where they had paused, remember, in the North Atlantic to go fishing for a little while. They don't, on the way back, follow the coast of South America on the one hand and the coast of Africa on the other, because that was about 50% of the birds followed the coastline of Africa, and 50% of the birds followed the coastline of South America on the way down to Antarctica. But on the way back up, they fly kind of directly in the middle of the Atlantic, more or less. They're obviously their flight patterns curve a little bit, but the idea here is that they're trying to get to the summer breeding grounds as quickly as possible, and they are really fueled up by all of those fish that they ate down in Antarctica for their summer holidays. And now they're headed to the Arctic, and they take the fastest route possible for them. And this takes, so around now, it's May, beginning of May, around now they're already past the equator and probably pretty close, getting pretty close to their summer breeding grounds. Because as I said, they really make, their trip back is really probably twice as fast as their trip down. So they're heading up there. They're probably getting there. And so that's the Arctic tern. Amazing migratory birds. They estimate that they fly about 44,000 miles a year. And that is a lot. That means that over a lifetime of, say, 30 years, they can fly around 1.5 million miles. So, amazing story. The fact that they spend the summer in the Arctic and the summer in the Antarctic, which sounds paradoxical, but because those are opposite times of year, it makes sense when you think about it for a second. But that's pretty amazing, and they're just wonderful birds. So in honor of the Arctic tern, let's draw a card to see about how we should navigate our lives and work. So yellow lemons, blue dumplings, magenta noodles, cards, tell us some things. All right, here we go. Oh, it's card number 2. Oh, this is fitting. It's all about shipping. So we were talking about the Atlantic and navigating and all that. And so this is a great one. So card number 2 is all the ships belong to you. There's an ancient story about a man with an illness that made him believe that all the cargo ships going in and out of a port belonged to him. And he would spend his days at the harbor and greet his ships happily when they came into port. And when he was cured of his illness, he would tell people the story of how happy his life was when he was a shipping magnate. All pleasure and no pain. So think about where your port is, what you're doing, and what the ships are for you, and fill in this blank, okay? Ready? It would be crazy if blank. All right? So it would be crazy if blank. Say that to yourself, fill in that blank with whatever pops to mind, and know that you will do this in the future, and then feel the joy. Maybe imagine you're in Arctic Tern and you've reached the Weddell Sea or Greenland, either one you want to choose. Then you're just so happy to have arrived. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you tomorrow on Life's Potluck Buffet.